Alaric Darconville, insurrect, courteous, liturgical, was 29 years old. He had the pointed medieval face of a page boy, which showed less of mature steadiness than innocent deliberation, an expensive colouring backlit with a kind of intangible grace, and his eyes of a strange tragic beauty, dark and filled with studying what's represented by what is, could light up like a monk at Jubilee when rounding the verge of a new idea and sparkle up in happy conviction as if to say, Excelsior! He dreamed, like Astrophel, with his head in the stars. His mind was like one of those Gothic cathedrals of which he was so fond, mysterious within and filled with light, a brightness at once richer and less real than the light of day, flashing accompaniment, on occasion, to the long satirical tirades of which he was also capable, and yet wakefully aware, in gentleness, of what in matters of difficulty he felt should either be removed, pitied, or understood. He was 6 feet tall. His hair he wore long, like the Renaissance prince at his lyre, and it matched in colour his coat of jet, which was of an obsolete but distinct cut, and as black as the mundus where Romans communed with their dead. An opening section and description of the protagonist, Alaric Darconville, of Alexander Thoreau's Darconville's Cat. A word of warning before I venture fully into this review. It is going to basically be hyperbolic. It's going to sound at times somewhat ridiculous, if not almost fawning in its praise of this book, which I do consider to be up there with the greats, Moby Dick, Ulysses, the recognitions by Gaddis, these absolute greats of literature. It has shot very quickly into my top 10, if not top 5 books of all time. It is the definition of accomplished and a masterpiece. Now, to go alongside those statements from myself, and before I go fully forward into the review, I have to state that I'm indebted to Stephen Moore's Alexander Thoreau Fan's Notes, which, as far as I'm aware, is the only book-length secondary on Thoreau, and I would assume the first of what will be many once the greatness of Thoreau is realized, likely after his death, unfortunately. But to quote Moore from the introduction, Darconville's Cat, or The Jilt's Companion, as Thoreau once referred to it in conversation, is a monumental novel in several senses of the word. It is a lasting reminder of a love affair, erected in memory of the great love of Darconville's life, and a record of the tragic course of their affair. It is a monument to the English language, a vast burial ground of archaic words and sentiments, intellectual traditions, literary forms, and rhetorical devices rarely used anymore. And it is monumental in the more idiomatic sense of massive. Over 700 pages long, an encyclopedic range of references to literature, art, history, religion, and philosophy from every era of human history, thick with learning and lore, aflame with excoriating satire, alight with love, choked with hate, and waterlogged with grief. Simply thinking of the novel can bring tears to my eyes, yet it is also laugh-out-loud funny. It exhausts my superlatives. Then Moore, which is quite apt for this point of this review, though I will go into the plot more as I give more readings, gives us a very, very, very quick one-paragraph overview of the plot, which, considering what Moore has just said about the novel, and my own appreciations of it, makes you realize how paradoxically simple Darconville's Cat is as a novel. Once again, to quote Moore, and this is him giving an overview of the storyline. The storyline is fairly straightforward. Alaric Darconville, a learned and rather aloof ex-novice, comes to Quincy College in Virginia to teach and write. There he falls in love with one of his students, Isabel Rawsthorne, who seems to return his love. But soon, feeling out of her league with Darconville, she admits to herself that she would feel safer with a neighborhood boy, Gilbert Vanderslang. She strings Darconville along until she is sure of Gilbert's reciprocal feelings, and then tells Darconville she no longer loves him. Darconville, who is teaching at Harvard at this point and finalizing arrangements for their marriage, is destroyed by the news, and as he realizes the extent of her betrayal, contemplates revenge with the encouragement of Dr. Abel Crucifer, a strange ex-professor he meets at Harvard. Darconville returns to Virginia and waits outside Isabel's house with a gun, but seeing the tree upon which he had carved the word "remember" in happier days, he abandons his plans for revenge and instead travels to Venice to stay in his grandmother's palazzo and write a novel about the affair. Racing against a fatal illness, he manages to finish and dies. Moore admittedly does then go on to expand upon the fact that brief overview, of course, can't do justice to the novel. Now, in my own quick appreciation of the novel, thinking about it and writing a few notes last night before this review, I would describe it thus: sickeningly good, in the sense that anyone who, after reading this novel, has written stories or even written novels and consider themselves to some degree a writer will, in the face of the greatness of this novel, will either question their abilities as a writer, or at least look at their work and realize that it was simply trying an attempt at writing. It is piously Catholic to a degree that goes beyond the bounds of sort of fools for God. It is unapologetically misanthropic, and many of the characters explicitly engage with a form of misogyny that is out of this world. It's out of its own bounds. It is caustically anti-Academy, both in its explicit content, as one of the readings I will give will show, but also in its constant prodding of references and erudition. It is vehemently anti-Protestant in its comedy, and once again in its content. It is, with regards to Dr. Abel Crucifer, one of the most original and unique creations in all of literature, fiendishly cunning and satanic. Not to say the book itself is satanic, but this character, who again I will get to, brings forth this form of fiendishness that is like screw tape has been deformed and transformed into something of pure, genuine evil. But at the same time, it is whimsically loving. It is cunningly witty. It is in the tradition, as per Moore, of learned wit, like Tristram Shandy and Rabelais and Swift and writers of this vein. It is arrogantly referential, with books that, Thoreau himself said, no one has written of or even mentioned for 400 years. It is, of course, one of the more infamous aspects of the novel, filled to the brim with words that one will seriously never hear or read in their entire life outside of this novel, and Thoreau takes a great pride in that. It is subtly complex without delving into ridiculous postmodern tricks, because it is linear, but at the same time, take all of that, it is surprisingly simple. It is a simple novel, and oddly, considering all of those aspects of the novel, one of the cornerstones, and one of the first things I thought once I'd got sort of 200 pages into the novel, is something that doesn't seem to actually have sympathy with all of this articulate and erudite nature that is often directed at Thoreau and specifically Darconville's Cat, which is that, and this will sound very odd, at root, this simplicity, this surprising simplicity, at root, this is just a really good book, which sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, but some of the books that Darconville's Cat is often put alongside, and I think incorrectly, to be quite honest, this often happens with long, especially referential and complex books, but specifically long books. Gaddis's Recognitions, Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow, Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest, Darconville's Cat, because of various, let's say, material or just technical things about them. One, they're long. Two, they include an immense amount of detail. They get thrown into this kind of sort of postmodern maximalism. And this just doesn't stand for Thoreau's book. So in the sense that it's a really good book, it's a page-turner. This is the fastest 700-page book I've read. It goes by very fast. In the sense that Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow, and I don't want to put these two together, but as another example, one wouldn't get 200 pages into that and think this is a good book in the sense of just a pure enjoyment. The obfuscation and obscure nature of Pynchon's work, for instance, kind of bars it from being just a book that you can sit down and read in that sense. And so Thoreau has managed to do two seemingly contradictory things at once, which is that this is a book you can just pick up and read in pure enjoyment, whilst at the same time holding an immense amount of complexity, wit, and skill, and encyclopedic, erudite referential data. It is a love letter to language. It borders on, let's say, an affair with language that is at once borderline perverse and a sort of lower G godlike megalomania, sort of a Nietzschean megalomania when he's writing essays that basically state why I am so smart. This is a megalomaniac love letter bordering on perversity with regard to language. But Thoreau's clear care and sincere absolute love of the history of literature, love of language, love of words, what they can do, and literary forms overflows to such a degree that one can't help but be completely enamored and carried away by just that feeling that he manages to project to the reader, just a pure enjoyment, alongside the hilarity, sadness, truth, love, and beauty of it all. Because, well, the plot aside, what is Thoreau really dealing with in this novel? If you had to condense it down, you can't condense it down to one theme, really, because the single theme, if it had to have one, immediately bursts into two. And Thoreau is consistently making this point throughout the novel, which is, okay, if you condense down the whole novel, what is he talking about? He's talking about love. He's not really, Thoreau has said in an interview that he's not massively interested, and I think he even goes so far as to say he's not interested in any writers since Joyce. I think that one can read between the lines here and state that Thoreau is really not a postmodernist in the sense that he is still interested. If we take the Jean-François Lyotard's understanding of postmodernism as the destruction of overarching ideals and great truths like beauty, love, hatred, religion, belief, faith, grace, etc. Thoreau isn't interested post-Joyce because post-Joyce those things begin to crumble, and he still holds them as completely real, completely worthy of a sincere respect that doesn't need to go into those debates about sincerity or irony. He isn't just engaging with them on terms that hasn't allowed that post-Joycean world of postmodernism to destroy them. And so what's it to deal with? Okay, condense it down. It's to do with love. That's the primary theme. But Thoreau's point is that immediately has it can't exist without its inverse, which is hate. And so I'll get to the structure and many of the forms later on, but the structure is 100 chapters over 700 pages. One of the reasons it moves so fast is because these chapters just come thick and fast with very explicit set pieces in many of them. It's 100 chapters, and then there is sort of this key midpoint, and then it's arguably split into love and hate, because the first half is about Alaric and Isabel falling in love, and then the second half is them, let's say, falling out of love, and the beginning of Darconville's rising hatred in the fact that his love has been tarnished or betrayed. So that is like sort of just the beginning, and I have many themes of the book that I want to touch on, beginning with the academic critical stance of Alaric in the novel as a teacher. This is from page 22 to 23. And there's a lot of long excerpts because they are, you could pick it once again, much like my previous talk on McCarthy's Suttree. This is a book you can open at any point. There is not a word put wrong, and everything is crafted and as Moore points out by using one paragraph from the book, everything is crafted with a technical and historic literary ability that borders on, you wonder where this even came from. It genuinely is literary genius, but there you go. I did say this is going to be fawning. There was nothing Darconville could find to say, search his heart though he might. They slipped behind the courthouse and walked through an alley past the Quincyburg jail where, high above their heads, they both noticed a series of black fists gripping the bars of the grills. A lonesome song drifted from one of the cells across the afternoon. What a beautiful morning that will be, let my people go. When time breaks up in eternity, let my people go. Miss Trapp halted again on the edge of a thought, the shadow of the building darkening her face. She looked up at him like Van Eyck's pinch-faced Arnolfini in her horizontal hat, and as Darconville again took her arm, the skin seemed to crumble between his fingers, like burial earth. She stared past him and placed a finger on her chin. And the strangest thing of all is, said she, you may not even have to pretend. It was clear. Darconville now saw that from her lugubrious pronouncements Miss Trapp had seen to more terrible depths than the town at first glance afforded, and, asking her various questions, he began to learn more of what oppressed her. Quincyburg was a closed account. It was a place apparently reduced to total irrelevance, to terms that, while having fallen to the category of the tedious and the negligible, were yet maintained in the hollowness of their churchianity, the religion, deportmentalized and moralistic, of the prodigal son's brother, and reinforced in a terrible irony of reciprocity by the cynical and nonconformist whingings of Luther, Melanchthon, Bucer, Pomeranus, Knox, Flacius Erisius, and various other sons of revolt. If it seemed at first the kind of town that customarily salted its appeal with a sort of grassroots neighborliness, the notion didn't last. Insiders were in, outsiders out. When and if friendship was shown, she said, it was the type of loving kindness that uncomfortably verged on tyranny. They wanted not so much to convince you of their opinions as to deprive you of your own. And typical of so many other one-crop regions that had taprooted out of the normal world, pockets of homogeneity bypassed by culture and change, most of its townsfolk were in the grip of an acute xenophobia that filled the vocabularies of their villagious language with a repetition of paranoid they-them pronouns, and convinced them that beyond the particular borders of their town spread the etceterated sloughs of godlessness where people drank, swiped, backslid, and gambled away their wives. They stuck together in the same way that piranhas, seeing certain immaculate spots of identification, would not attack each other. Politically, the community was so far to the right it jimmied the left. In terms of actual religious belief, Quincyburg's oxymoronically was in fact a civic faith. Spiritual obligation had devolved to the concept of good citizenry, a quo ad sacra invariably performed as an endorsement for and in the name of the American way of life. Knowledge to them was the parent of malice. Ideas they met with derision, truth with suspicion, and differences with fear. For any other way of life one couldn't raise their temperatures a therm. They lived, they knew, the way it was done, and the devil, the great disturber of our faith in this world, couldn't raise in the townsfolk there one scruple whatsoever leading to alternatives. They will be there yesterday, they were there tomorrow, they are. So, with regards to what I mentioned about the anti-academia, which is to come, because when he begins at Quincyburg College, my apologies, I got two quotations, two excerpts there mixed up. This is Darconville moving to the town of Quincyburg, which, as you can see, is an archetype described by Thoreau of nothingness nowhere. It is nothingness in its normality. There is really nothing there, and this carries over to Quincy College, which I'll get to. But briefly, one can very easily state that this is a novel that is retelling the author Alexander Thoreau's real life biography. That those aspects, to a degree, I don't necessarily want to get into because I don't think it's all that interesting to do that. But with regard to teaching and falling in love with a student, and then having that love portrayed very much in the same way, that biographically, as I understand it, is largely true, up to the point where, in this novel, Alaric decides, falls in with Crucifer, who we'll get to, then tries to persuade him to actually kill her. That didn't happen IRL. What did happen in real life is that Darkonville's novel, the novel was written as a response to let's say, the betrayal or the end of this love. But the biographical aspects do come into play a little bit, because the character Alaric Darkonville, prior to this entry into Quincyburg, this nothing surrounded by nowhere on page 13, he takes up this position as an English instructor at Quincy College, women's college in Quincyburg. But prior to this, we are to understand that he was he first joins the Franciscans, then he's a Trappist for a very brief period. He does not fit in, and his passion for words and language and literature sort of overtakes and is the more important thing prior to that. So we understand he's a religious. He was prior to this a very serious monastic, very or a seriously faithful and pious person to take up, Franciscan or a Trappist call. And this does mirror Thoreau's own biography. So, a lot of these aspects are coming in there for those that I guess know. But I don't think it's because of how just transparent it is. I mean, to what degree is it interesting to focus on that? And the fact of the matter of the real book, Darkonville's Cat, which I'm holding in my hand, is very much the book being written by Alaric Darkonville as a response also. So the book is the book of the novel, which is being written as the book, if that makes sense. So you could argue that that's a little bit of a postmodern nod, in the sense that you have read the fictional book that is being written by both the fictional character Alaric Darkonville, that is an approximation of Thoreau himself. But he eventually ends up in this nothing surrounded by nowhere, teaching English, and this is when I wanted to get to the academic excerpt, which, as you will see, is itself a further mirroring of that exact same feeling of Quincyburg, the town. And so Thoreau immediately is beginning with this criticism of anything that is asinine. This is a characteristic that stands out. This is perhaps what one might call the Corvonian aspect of Thoreau's character and literature in relation to Baron Corvo, is an eccentricity that lends itself to not just a love of the eccentric, as per Love and Hate, the love of the eccentric, and this borderline perverse, as per one reviewer whose name I can't remember, love of literature and engagement with the literature to the limit of almost that it becomes the sacred, as per the leave from the Trappists because of the love of language, as per Darkonville's Cat, which is a discussion of love and hate as inherently entwined. The love of the eccentric brings forth a hatred of the asinine, a hatred of the banal, and this comes through in Thoreau's engagement in the novel itself, and his writing and his style and his theatrics, but it equally comes through in the content, as we see from this section from Quincyburg College. "Shall we look at the Keats?" asked Darkonville quietly. It had been their first assignment to analyze one poem. There was a marked self-consciousness in the straightening of shoulders, in the coughs, as the students settled down resolutely to consider the poem. "As one must pronounce a Chinese ideograph in order to understand it," said Darkonville, "so also must a poem be read aloud. Would anybody care to do so?" He waited. Silence. "Anyone?" The girls remained earnestly hunched over their books, submissive to the idea that obscurity can be found in the solemnity of well-aimed concentration. "Anyone at all?" The linoleum snapped. Darkonville was amused. It seemed like Vesper hour at the Shaker rest home for invalid ladies. The discomfort was kept palpable. with not an eye on him. Then a hand shot up. Miss Darconville looked at his rollbook. Wint, the student provided. It was a girl in the third row who resembled Copernicus, the shape of her page boy. Its two guiches come forward like tongs and swinging at the jawline, making her look small as a creepy stool. She turned to one of her girlfriends for confidence, then stood up and began. Bright star, would I were steadfast as thou art, not in lone splendour hung aloft the night, and watching with eternal lids apart, like nature's patient, sleepless, eremite, said Darconville. Hermit. Rachel Wint, wrinkling her nose, squinted at the word. Darconville, repeating the word, prodded her. Just pronounce the consonants, Darconville said, laughing, trying to relax her, and the vowels will fall into place. Two girls in the back row now exchanged cold glances. They didn't find that particularly funny. Rachel Wint, bewilderingly twisted up a noil of her hair, shrugged and continued. The moving waters at their priest-like task of pure ablution round earth's human shores, or gazing on the new soft-fallen mask of snow upon the mountains and the moors. Perfect, let's stop there, said Darconville. Where the octave and sestet hinge, this is a sonnet, composed, if you'll notice, in one sentence, in which the poet expresses a wish. And what, let's ask ourselves, is that wish? He paused. Anybody? He's wishing he was a star. Wishing. Your thlipsis is showing, thought Darconville, looking in the direction of the voice. It was a long-nosed piece of presumption in the last row, wearing an armoury of Scandinavian nail jewellery, who was less concerned with a romantic poet's tragic wishes than after-shampoo flyaways if the comb she simultaneously shuttled through her hair to the repetitious snaps of chewing gum meant anything. Darconville smiled and kindly suggested that she was, even if a trifle so, somewhat wide of the mark. Snap, another hand. Anyone? Miss. The voice came from the direction of, but it was not hers. Darconville, with no small difficulty, fixedly tried to keep his eyes focused on this student alone, a moon radiant only for the proximity of that adjacent sun whose beauty, even in a condition of reflected light, seemed startling enough to destroy his sight on the instant. Trinley Moss, answered the girl, standing up, her 6 bracelets jangling in an opera-blue turtleneck sweater and plaid wraparound, safety pin to the thigh. Well, I believe he's right unhappy, she said, and that this star he mentions, symbolizing brightness, is driving this poor child here, I don't know, to wishing he could either touch it or, I don't know, just plain old flop down and become she shrugged, an eremite. So Darconville's not happy, and neither is Thoreau. So the content and the between-the-line discussion of what Thoreau is trying to put forth are completely mirrored. That there is, arguably, and many would say this about Thoreau, I think, in his writing, there is an arrogance and a disgust and a demand that is of a height that isn't found really elsewhere in literature. We might say that Nabokov demands this much of us. Maybe Gaddis, he's very demanding as a writer. But Thoreau not just demands a lot from his reader, but he consistently, within the content, prods at his frustration and annoyance at that asinine nature with regards to beauty and truth and the destruction of it. And so we find someone who is Thoreau himself, Alaric Darconville, placed within a position where his talents and this explosive overflow of love of language is consistently stifled and is not finding any avenue that is respectful. And in this sense, the eccentricity just sort of consistently flies out of its own bounds. Again, just on this academic angle, we also find this within the teaching. And we also find this within the staff and the Queensberg College faculty themselves, in that this is not a place where these things are beauty, love, truth. They're not treated with the reverence that Thoreau and Darconville believe that they should be afforded. The staff themselves are very ignorant to literature. And so the place where we are positioned within Darkenville's account, which largely is Quincyburg, is the pinnacle of asinine nothingness surrounded by nowhere, again, to quote the book, just a small town in the backwater south. And within this is placed Alaric Darkenville, who is written completely unapologetically. And so it's this friction that we begin with. But it's arguably also this friction that destroys, begins the demise of Darkenville, because the biography of Darkenville and the introduction of Quincyburg and Quincy College and the reality and just the description of that life, that takes us roughly to about 80 pages. And then it's about page 80 where we finally meet Isabel Rawsthorne, the beautiful 18-year-old freshman that Darkenville falls in love with. And this is from 83 upon the how she is described, both by Darkenville, as we know from the ending that this is the novel that he is writing about this affair, and also in description of the events themselves. So it's very cunning. Of course, there's a lot of playing around with the notion of a narrator, etc., etc. That's, a given, let's say. It was Isabel Rawsthorne, the chaste huntress, a golden Phrygian in white tunic, her hair knotted behind in a bun of Attic beauty by an ox-hide thong. The girl, plainly sought after, wooed, admired, seemed to breed idolatry among her classmates who consistently coupled up to her for conversation. She was the best in the field. Everyone knew it, the students, the teacher. Oh, certainly the teacher. The teacher indeed. As stared the famished eagle from the Digention rock on a choice lamb that bounds alone before a Bandusha's flock, Miss Ballhatchet stared on Isabel. Darkenville, even at that distance, isolated her and watched her graceful movements. She worked as dexterously as a Mede, a scythe, a Lycian. He could almost feel the sweat perspiration on the glistening down of her cobnut-coloured arms. Flushed with each triumph, she shot after shot, splat, a gold, splat, splat, a red, gold, splat, a gold. So pleased was she that fit Miss Ballhatchet, otherwise aggressing from one to another to stay the trembling hand, to thread the wobbling shaft, to mutter an apt warning, never failed to circle this girl by the waist, take her to herself, and symphonically whisper a soft word of praise into the Bellamant's golden hair, as if to say, with Caliphonos of Gadara, O love, thy quiver holdeth no more winged shafts, for all thine arrows are into me. The thought, however, was not Darkenville's. It couldn't be. Fate, as he took it, had long ago convinced him, if of the magic of earthly and mortal beauty, then also of its dangers. One, he knew, could not infer the existence of a reality which departed from the idea one had of it, and it was not enough to have the idea of a beautiful woman to conclude that it also existed. Gentle she seemed, breathtaking and mysterious, yes, a child of his daydreams, one glorious flower of many and glorious, a girl of fierce midnights and famished morrows, no doubt, yes, yes, yes. But the artist's love of beauty, he also knew, should be totally separated from his desire, no? Yes, and between the soul and its abilities, what would look into the heart of all vision, would admit a difference. So Darkenville's love for Isabel really doesn't differ from this. It is boundless with a romantic literary energy, and continues in this vein every time he mentions Isabel. Now, the one of the things that Thoreau brings forward, so it's one of the places where the distinction of forms and language styles and just prose itself is the difference between Isabel Rawsthorne as this 18-year-old freshman and Alaric Darkenville, whose history we now know, and who's also had time and experience on his side, who's 29. Darkonville's language is consistent. Darkonville's own language, as in writing this book and what he's saying in the text itself, is consistently Thoreauian. It is overflowing with the love of literature and reference. It is erudite and it is articulate and it is literary. Isabel, however, is in the sense that I've previously mentioned about this is a novel of dualities, love, hate, beauty, ugliness, but also one of the more important dualities is, if we could say, is eccentricity in the asinine, or even just intrigue in the asinine, or intrigue in the banal. Darkonville is engaged. He is, as per, we could say, the silent reverential brought forth from the monastic, the Trappist, a true engagement with God's creation. Darkonville is engaged with creation, with all aspects, with details, with meaning. He's deeply engaged with meaning, and this isn't just love, it's love that is then completely understood in that history that he understands of. This is one of those loves. And he's of that side, of that Corvonian, Swiftian side of eccentricity, especially a Corvonian side of an unapologetic eccentricity. He is of that world, and Isabel Ralston isn't. It's Thoreau is often described as a cruel or a mean writer, and there is some truth in that, because Isabel is not described in that sense. The way she talks about things, the way she speaks just in dialogue, is boring. She really isn't all that much. She's not, she's not dumb, or the cruelty doesn't go that far. And as I'm yet to get to those novels, I believe it does in some of Thoreau's later novels. But equally, there is a complete impasse between Darkonville having to consciously and consistently utilize his own intrigued ability to sort of repair the what isn't there, as this arguably an imbalanced articulation of the world, an imbalanced creation. Darkonville is invested in creation, invested in history and literature, and Isabel is not invested. She is just a normal person against, the great and sort of overtly romantic Darkonville. And so, what do we as the readers see? Not necessarily immediately, it does take perhaps another 100 pages for this to become explicit for us readers, is that this is not going to work. The language of Darkonville is attempting to repair and heal a world of banal intrigue that just is not interested. She is a girl of Quincyburg, of Quincy College. She is, as per she hails from she hails from Virginia, but she's of this setting, of a low degree, we are told by the novel, and so a further excerpt where this is sort of about 20 pages later, where this is sort of the love is beginning to, as per Darkonville's writing in Darkonville's Cat itself, begins to take on this furor, this dangerous level. And we can see that if there is to be this kind of unfortunate syzygy between love and hate, that the one has to be for the other, love first, and then from that the only possibility is that hate has to be, is that we can feel that in this coming failure, because of the imbalance and unmatched engagement with the world and engagement with meaning, we can see that what can only be coming down the pipeline is the inverse of this, in relation to the heights of its potency. And there's a feeling of danger that Darkonville's love is accelerating and expanding to such a degree that what's to come, if it is to come, as this inverse, can only be of equal reaction, and that's a dangerous feeling. So This is just the end of chapter 20, where just after Darkonville begins to sort of name and nickname Rawsthorn in that sort of sense. The cold mist haunted the fallows with the odour of trees, stubble and seeds, dampness and earth musk, and the spotted plage of decaying leaves. An owl pitch-piped. The trees were loaded with mast, their boughs pendulous and brown, and piles of leaves gave way to his tread. What was there in forests representing more of mystery than light? That now promised to illuminate just where he must go. And now he was climbing up over the rocks, the branches and leaves in the moonlight throwing strange Pelagisaurian figures everywhere about him. A wild wind gusted at his coat at several points, only blowing up his fever to climb up even higher, as if resolved to discover in the spectral, astro-poetic light of some clearing above a height perhaps fashioned from what he felt. The tall presences of Aeons and Archons, Peris and Paracletes, mystic thrones and 12-winged Calcladidae beckoning him forward less from where he stood than closer toward where she was. It was fated. Their souls must have been in love before they had been born, and were dreaming this dream they were living. A promise of love, though blind and slow, like all prophecies that participated in and so would last an eternity. The moon, bright, black in shadows, gave every green thing a fivefold addition to its greenness and whited out away. The wind swirled and looped his coat as he reached the very height of the hill, and the uprushing of enchantment he felt flooding his arms, making him almost delirious, seemed to send him soaring past the regions of the earth where, giving to the wind the kisses it returned, high in the cataracts of air, beyond the running clouds, he pointed to the world that formed her face and cried out in ecstasy, "I love you." We are in danger here as a reader. This is page 108. We've got 600 pages to go. And what are we to do with this? How are we to hold this? What is this engagement with the world? And the book has a pace. It is occasionally, there is these sort of stop valves that are needed. Otherwise it might turn into just a complete sort of, let's say, love-death march towards something. But it does have a pace that I think sort of does inform Mirror Moby Dick in that sense, that we are ever being pulled towards a conclusion that had to be. Darkonville is mentioning destiny, but we have the feeling, I think, as a reader, in noticing the disparity between the textual reality of Isabel and Darkonville, that this Darkonville isn't holding what we're holding, and it has to break, and it has to break in the way that it does. Now, so far we sort of giving you a glimpse of something that seems grand. It seems ornate. To just before I go on, this is going to be a very long review. Just before I go on, I will show this from Moore's. This is where I'm getting this from, because so far it seems of a certain style only. This is the only place you can find these, by the way. This is from Moore's book, Alexander Through. There's 2 pages there for those that are only listening. It's 2 pages that have the images of the ad sequence in Publishers Weekly from 1981. These 2 huge full-page ads. But the one that interests me, and it's just the boldest hyperbolic advert you can imagine for a book, and so this is what the advert says. So there's 3 there's like a triptych of squares for those that are listening, describing the book. And the left square says Rabelaisian, Proustian too, and Stendhalian, a brilliant idiosyncratic work. And then the next one, Joycean, also Gogolian and Corvonian. According to its author, it contains words that haven't been uttered in 400 years. And then the next one, Swiftian, as well as Johnsonian, also Linden, perhaps Nabokovian. In publishing circles, it's already something of a legend. These adverts attest to something that just doesn't seem to, you wouldn't believe it could be held within its bounds. And so what's interesting is, so far the excerpts I feel have been given, that they have a certain feel, a certain harking back to that pre-Joycean era without tricks to postmodernism, but it is immensely funny with an engagement. It is published. Sorry, I should have said this right at the start. It's Thoreau's second novel, published in 1981. And out of print, so for those that want to read this now after my review, you are going to find that you're going to have to spend a lot of money. Alexander, if you are listening, please talk to a publisher and get it republished. If there's any publishers listening, pester Thoreau to get it republished. But it does. One of the things is it just wouldn't work as a digital thing. This is an artifact of a book, absolutely. So it does need to be published in this hardback sort of large style. There is a paperback version, but it includes a lot of say formatting intrigue as a serious book. But equally, like, to give an example of what I mean of wanting to give another example of differing styles. We're at Quincy College, which is a women's college, and these are freshmen, 18-year-old women, and this is Thoreau reading in a chapter called "The Clitheroe Kids." This is Thoreau writing about that their average sort of night in their dormitories. But for the copesmates in Clitheroe 403, it was considered by most of them vulgar to worry. Tomorrow, a pother, a pox, a feather, a fig. For if for them the night grew short, the morning was a world away. That was that, and no amount of pressure could ever hope to lessen the conviction beating in their little hearts that they had been established there for all time in the immortal words of Miss Scarlett O'Hara, the Belle of Tara, who, when bravely standing against the world, deathlessly pronounced, "I'll think of it all tomorrow. After all, tomorrow is another day." It was the true materia poetica of Dixieldom, original, quintessential, the primal screamers of the South. "Oh, gross," cried Anaphora Frank. "Listen to this." So this is Anaphora Frank giving an excerpt of the smutty magazine that they're reading in the dorm. "Oh, gross," cried Anaphora Frank. "Listen to this." The diddling was hot, hot, hot. Rhoda, utterly enslaved, was sobbing, moaning, gasping, and rolling her eyes. How hard, thought Rafe, can a dame press up to a guy, huh? Brother. And why, he wondered, do a dame's tears taste so good? He squeezed her ninnies and humped in heaves like a crazed rabbit, while the little sextress, groaning low in her throat, dug her enamelled nails into his hairy back. "Oh, baby, this is positively maddening," squealed Rhoda, even though she felt like 2 cents. "You're driving me crazy, you hear me? Crazy." The sexcapade continued. She had spunk. He liked that. And so Rafe took his huge, lubricated engine and... "I'm going to get wet," said Mimsy Borogroves, revolving her torso. Sally Ann Sprouse made revving noises like an engine. "Y'all shush, will ya?" screamed Loretta Boyko, who, dropping her book, leaped up and nearly grotting herself on the cord, was yerked backwards like a yo-yo. Pan-furiously unplugging her hairdryer, she stomped out of the room, bristling like a hedgehog. Mona Lisa Drake, sellotaping her wet-locked hairdo, simply fluttered her eyelids and stuck out her tongue at the door Loretta Boyko summarily slammed. "Who's she, something on a stick?" "Straight arrow," said Donna Wincoop, a wonk. "I am the Queen of England," prescribed Heska Pumpkin, pointing a regal finger at the door, "and you are dismissed." "Saint Loretta," said Jessie Lee Deal, who took the book, which, giggling, Aowen Pitts grabbed only to have it snatched from her by Geraldine Oikel, who read. Like a wild stud, suctioning her tongue, gasped on a wave of ecstasy. "You ain't seen nothing yet, sister." And he lunged at horny Rhoda, whose skin was foxing with lustful chills. They kissed ravishly. The kiss snapped, and then he made a quick little feelies all over her body with his expert tongue, ranging over her diamond-hard nipples and down, down, down to the fringed secrets below. "Oh, yes, yes, Rafe, yes," husked Rhoda. "Touch me there." Holy bananas, thought Rafe. What a broad, what bliss, what a sex-stravaganza. "She must be killing him," scracked Celeste Schuyler. Donna Wincoop clapped. "Ain't it the bee's knees?" So, okay, we can see that the people who do state that this book is postmodern, there is this one of the perhaps more key aspects textually and stylistically of postmodern literature, as per someone like DeLillo, is the mingling of supposed high art and low art. And I think forth through there is an intermingling constantly, but the low art, the smut, and various other, what we could say, things of that nature that are brought in, they're dragged in and utilized as these sort of seeds of secular revelation, seeds of a revealing of the reality of that asinine side of existence, but seen from the point of view of Darkonville, who is completely of that other world. That's just that whole scene is so thoroughly witty and enjoyable to read that I couldn't help but read it out. But sort of another aspect that needs to be brought in, and we're jumping forward about 80 pages here to page 184, is the more peculiar aspect. This is in a chapter called Hansel and Ratzel, and I'll draw this in with why I felt the need to bring in that smut section. This is with just a discussion between Isabel and Darkonville. I mean, said Darkonville, taking her arm, there is a sort of consolation in seeing that little thing squittering around up there, It jigs, you could say, to synthesize worlds that have been separated, folding its wings and shooting upon its errand out of the valley of Funnel, and connecting even for a brief interval the 5 elements. 5 elements? Earth, air, fire, water, and? You, thought Darkonville. And ether, he said, the quintessential. The kite caromed in the faraway air. As if preoccupied with one of her thoughts, Isabel tweaked the line and silently watched the tiny vessel plaintively tossing in the vast and mighty ocean above her. Preoccupied himself now, Darkonville took the conversation a bit further. Sometime, Isabel, he said, open the Bible to the book of Genesis. There is a little fright there amid its exegetical thickets. The phrase, and God saw that it was good, is for some reason omitted after the 2nd day of creation. You know what I mean? Isabel wasn't sure. I mean, no one has ever figured that out. I've often thought, however, that a gust of wind sent the kite into a lunatic figure 8, whereupon, looking up, Isabel opened her mouth expectantly. Well, that on the particular day came the first disuniting of what God had created. The elements, if now separate, were once all one, an unindividuated world become multiple, only in it that it might be comprehended, and say, in one thunderclap, that hereat now invisible world suddenly banged into a vast network of intermundia. Gases, air, flame, and huge chunks of smoking telluric mole flew out into a gravity-locked exosphere. He waved his arms up. The one became the many. Now, there are various moments where Darkonville is given to theological explanation, to his prior Trappist leaning, his what one excerpt I will give later on, to his unapologetically Roman Catholic, and not just Catholic, that sort of, when people say I'm a Roman Catholic, that emphasis on, it's a bit emphasis on the anti-Protestant nature, emphasis on a sort of rather elitist ceremonial nature. But this is equally entwined because, as per being written by Darkonville himself, arguably, as this looking back, but obviously written by Thoreau, the unapologetic nature draws in, terms such as Eden, grace, the sacred, along with drawing in like Hodliel and Ariel and very specific angelic names that one would only come across either if they've read a book on angelology, the very, very specific and encyclopedic book on angelology, or if someone had delved fairly deeply into the occult, which I believe Thoreau has, and I'll get to that as well. But this is, we have these two worlds, one that is asinine, that is filled with smut, filled with people that aren't really anything at all, and one that is eccentric. But that world is sacred. That world is explicitly sacred for Thoreau. There is, angels are quite literally doing things in this world. They're moving things. Things are related to Eden and the fall and grace in an explicit manner. That's made clear. And so, as you know, another dialogue that's happening is a certain form of sacred meaning brought about by a genuine worship of silence, worship of things, put in relation to a world that no longer seems to care about it, no longer actually will engage with it on that level. And so, you know, this is something that's made clear and through in certain interviews, the few that there are, that it's almost, I think he feels it's almost like a disbelief that someone still understands Catholicism in the way that he does, in that form of belief that there are angels doing certain things. And for Aquinas, there's so many angels on the head of a pin, and they are these explicit agents in the world. And this is a book where they come through in that side of eccentricity, as possibilities. He's once again, off the back of my review of his early stories, he's a writer of grace, and I think for Darconville, with that prior biography, the engagement with love and hate, and the overarching pre-postmodern grand signifiers of meaning, is one that is intertwined with grace, with this is coming from somewhere else and is important for that factor. But that can't make sense when it comes to the butts up against the lukewarm. It just doesn't know what to do with the lukewarm, and so sort of tries to caress and wrap around the lukewarm, but that just doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't really work. So he then, and this is where it really gets to be even more interesting, because you end up in one of the more postmodern aspects of the book. If there is, I really don't want to clarify it's a postmodern book. But eventually, page 2, beginning at page 222, and that's chapter. Couldn't tell you. No. Darconville decides to write. So Darconville, the character, as this English teacher, who is a representative through his own experience, arguably, that, though again, I don't want to just draw this. It's many things. Ultimately, book is everything at once. Writes an essay on love. And so we have, not only do we have Darconville, this character we've learned is being taken away by the excesses of a sacred love, of a sacred engagement with love, of a grace-filled engagement, borderline megalomaniac engagement with love, equal to his love of language. In relation to Isabel Rawsthorne, a sort of agent who just cannot reciprocate. We understand that as readers. It's where this sort of mania of Darconville begins to really bubble up. Is that, okay, now we see him, he's making it explicit to us in a chapter called Love, that he's going to write, which is mirrored later on by a chapter called Hate, that he's going to write an essay on love. And so, what is this character that we understand that is no longer being written as the book, but is being written by the character, the essay is being written by the character in the book, that allows us to see everything. This allows us to see so many problems in his absolute excesses of this. So this is from Love. I won't read it all. Love, wrote Darconville, is as rare as the emotion of hate. I pray your divided attention. They are the extreme antipodes of each other in temperament, but never in endowment, and so bear a strange complementarity. Every time someone executes the action of one of them, the other specifically becomes the victim of not being executed. Each is of each a mirror image, yet explicitly looking at each, we implicitly look at both, as when looking in water face then answers to face. To be in the grip of one is to relish precisely not being in the grip of the other. A yes is valued only because it could have been a no, and vice versa. For the philosophical upshot of freedom shaped by choice is that we would not have been able to love and act if we were not also able to hate in potency. The lowest number is 2, which, lying down together in the sum it incorporates, pips the child, relativity. The mirror is indeed the parable of love, but you will remember this also. What one sees in the mirror is not in the mirror at all. The anagram of determination, thorough evil, is, I mean to rend it through love, the perfection of equation being the missing eye that must necessarily be lost for salvation in another. Love is the thirst which vanishes as you drink. It is, however, always in a state of becoming, moving from one definiteness to another, a synthesis of both identity and otherness. Approaches solely rationalistic or empirical fail in the face of it. We fall through such formulae weightless, for love often declines as fast as reason grows. It is not a what, but a that. And on and on and on, to this point where it begins to honestly to feel sort of like a delirium, which he's explicit on. And yet we will never cease to hear noises made, as they were of old, when in the white dust of the agora the Philonoetic Greeks sat with their legs crossed, feet decussated, and raised endless questions on the unbridled delirium. Does love love for love? Does love love to love? Does love lack what it loves? Does love like what it loves? Love loves to love love. It occurred to them as hate hates to love love. Therefore, exclaims Prometheus, hate loves to hate love. Hate love, gasps Epithemius. Why, 'tis impossible, sir. Say you so, replies Prometheus. Then hating cannot desire itself, and so they grapple, and so they will. He's lost. He's lost in a delirium. It seems that way, at least, and this is only 200 or so pages in, and it begins to build into something that isn't necessarily sustainable, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, in terms of the explicitness of the plot, we go through the continued sort of them falling in love with each other, as Isabel also, we understand, is discerning whether or not to be with another chap, Vanderslang, which obviously at the halfway mark she finally says to Darkenville that is what she wants to do. There is these sort of travel log sections at the same time. Darkenville goes to London for research. He invites Isabel. They go back to Virginia. He does. There are various meetings with family and things along these lines. And so then eventually the marriage begins to build, but it's a lot to hold in. I guess I just want to focus on really the aspects of love, hate, and the religious aspects, because they intrigue me so much. And they're the times when this sacred, this completely sacred world that does have a gothic edge to it, does intrude in a sincere fashion. And so at one point, Darkenville has a dream with the devil. This is from 249. He was soon fast asleep when, beating forward through the darkness to the front of his mind, came the poisonous Arch Lucifer, Satan himself, who, ready to kill what he wouldn't yet devour, squatted down by his ear like a foul Gryllus and whispered, I am Gog's ghost, come alive to pipe to you. Here would you see it. My porphyritic hoof. I rode up in a dog boat now to boot your god. I pun to amuse you, poet. Pay attention to me. I talk unlike you want to hear, upside down and backwards with a nice repetition of G's. The hump in them is the hump in your gunzel, tumorous, a gold cancer, the load you bear on your back. Isabel, there she is. Mistress Gummygut. I know you are ashamed to feel this way about someone you love, but look, the girl's legs are approximate occasion of sin to a cannibal, and that's your ideal. Laugh with me at her, can't you? You're. No, with more conviction. Oh, how I hate her. Her mammoth legs, her vanity about her hair, which she has either just washed or is about to. I hate the back of her head as she rides in your car with her collar turned up. She eats a lot, snacks. She doesn't know whether her arsehole is punched or bored. She weeps in the most unconvincing way I've ever seen. She repeats what you say and rarely offers anything to a conversation. Your ideal, I hear you call an ideal what I take to be a personified inconceivability. A Galapsius is nothing but a thing with a cat's face, but soft. She troops by with her mother. Parnels march by 2 and 3 saying, Sweetheart, come with me. Pay attention to me, or you shall not see all I see. I love you, Mahal Shahal Hashbaz. To partial piece of piety, I love you, but I pity you, for it is not written, Before the child shall have knowledge to cry, my father and my mother, the riches of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria shall be taken away. I will remind you of poetry if you let me, I promise. Not so she. She takes too much humouring and requires more attention than a rosebush with greenfly. Are you laughing? Oh, yes, laugh. That is wonderful. Reverence to this. stand beside me and watch. But of course, where are we? We're in Darkonville's own dream, with Satan seemingly not really knowing where to tempt him. It seems that Satan's temptation is to take Darkonville away from a love that is largely dangerous for him and not balanced and not requited, to be honest. And so, what exactly is Darkonville's Satan other than a sort of figure of insanity in a dream? Because we've seen how Darkonville writes about love, and we've seen how he's really caught in the furor again and the whirlwind of this form of love. And so the Satan figure talking about the faults of the Satan figure that comes from his own dream, talking about the faults of Isabel, seems to be unbalanced. It doesn't actually seem to make sense. And so Darkonville is really caught in a form of a sort of fool for God, but he's a fool for love. He's caught in something that once again, to repeat what I've been saying, is building and building. And so just before we get to sort of some more of a conclusion, with this sort of dream talk, with these sort of monologues, to mention again the structure, it's split into 100 chapters, split right in the middle between love and hate, a little bit more roughly than an exact split, but it is filled with, the smut as an example. There's a point where the discussion, the dialogue between Darkonville and Isabel is transformed into a play with couplets. There are countless poems in the book. There is fables. There is a whole host of other literary forms to hear as this sort of encyclopedia given to literature that is filled with these moments of some of the most sterling and arguably sublime prose put to print. But equally, there are these moments that one cannot deny that come through in them, and they're some of the funniest, to be quite honest. One of my favourite chapters in the book, for obvious reasons, is the Wyandotte Baptist Church, which is Darkonville, who is this ex-Trappist, devoutest of devout Roman Catholic, going to the Baptist Church, and this is how Thoreau writes the sermon by one Reverend W.C. Kluge, who is who's the Reverend of this Baptist Church. Motels, parerbacks books, sipping liquor, goose down pillows, supposed hay rides, men in bulging pants from magazines, girlies with eyelashes like dang rakes, profanity. That's how I pronounce it. But shall I put you in the picture, friend? Ain't never been a soul tumbling through them gates of eternity, but when I had first a little heap of trash, born in shame and set on magnetic north to grab at every pair of glands in sight, pouring flesh and doing like hogs. You proud of it? You aim to just be another one of those crap mouses that what I get for confabulating with y'all up here every Sunday of a morning? No, well, you best get saved, boy. Ephesians 2:2. Or don't come running to me, 'cause ain't nobody know how better plan on eating fish muddle and shoe fly pie forever. Clear? You vaporing with the Lord, you and planning on getting away with it, or are you going to get jerked up, every last one of you? The wages of sin is death. The wages of sin, don't bet your chewing gum otherwise, is that you're going to die. You with me? Everything from fig pecker to philosopher going to die. Hosea 9:7. Why, on the day of the great dividing jack, y'all be pawning your crispin pins, big city suits, mantles, fancy dude-up hats, and you name what all from the Montgomery ward. Habakkuk 3:7, and why, you ask, go no farther, and here I'll tell you. Why, just to buy your greedy, profane little self 1 minute from hell's black flames, which can burn, sear, blister, split, bubble, and boil. But too late, you drags and sorcerers and fornicators, because by then the Fahrenheit will have shot through the nipple of the thermometer like you wouldn't believe, and be scorching out your spatchcock and gizzards, which will be 1,000 times worse if you took liquor, 'cause that catches. And do you think the Lord is going to care two diddlies if you fry, wiping hell smoke out of your eyes, daubing your body with ashes to dink the heat? Not if you ain't willing to walk down Redemption Avenue. Not if you sloppy kissing the foot of Pharaoh. Not if you ain't right with him. But that's either here nor there, ain't it? Because if you was right with him, you things of Gomorrah, you'd have not been here in the first damn place. So this goes on quite a bit, and then Darkenville eventually gives him later on a sort of rebuttal with his own mirroring his own sort of fairly ridiculous Catholic retort to this about how they understand the Pope and things. But there is, and it's very intriguing to see this, and this is to bring in the more controversial aspects of Thoreau's writing. And I don't think they're controversial in the sense that they're then explicitly defending Catholicism in this way, in the sense that they're anti-Protestant. I think maybe if you'd written this in a time in the 80s and certainly a modern era, if you'd written this in a time of deep religious debates, then it's and pro-Protestant era, then it is going to be controversial. But what's strange is the controversy is the sincerity with which the religious discussions are being taken by Thoreau himself. Because the reason unto which he's written this so ridiculously as this kind of vehement attack on what is seen as the fairly transparent caricature veil of Protestantism, as this uproarious theatrics of belief in relation to the Darkenville-esque Trappist Catholicism, oh so serious ceremonial Catholicism, sacramental Catholicism, is a discussion that is being taken sincerely. It's being taken as a thing that is of importance both textually and in the novel. And so the controversy is I think the controversial aspect is that what is often conflated as a lot of Thoreau's meanness and possible cruelty is that he's happy to draw the line and say, no, this is the right thing. This is true. This is good. Beauty exists. Truth exists. The God I believe in exists. And the way in which I engage with that is the correct and true way to engage with it. And he does that via his characters. And he's more than happy. He's more than happy to stand by the truth. And I think what it is to just stand by the truth in this sort of fairly uproarious and witty manner that is the modern definition of controversy, because Thoreau is not tolerant. He's not a tolerant writer in any respect. You can't play the oh so typical modern game of trying to make every historical figure and every writer infallible. Oh, you read a biography and say, I think he was a nice guy. I mean, Thoreau doesn't have that. He's very much there. There is a lot of ego there, and I think I can't remember what. And Thoreau mentions in one interview the awfulness of the psychology era, how psychology has replaced the sacred. And I can't remember what writer it is who said that they didn't want to go to psychoanalysis because it would destroy them. Because, in doing that, you sort of dissipate you could say in a way you dissipate the uniqueness of the image of God, I think. And so Thoreau is someone who's vehemently against that. He is who he is. I am the way God made me, man. And with that is just no apologies, no tolerance. And it's really fantastic to read because, and I think it's why it will ultimately stand the test of time, is because it doesn't even in the content or even in between the lines attempt to try have this sort of contemporary quick retreat to kindness or tolerance. You have to take this as it is. So to continue through, probably about 20 more minutes going here, to continue through after this through to this strange fantastical travel log where Darkenville is relaying where he would wish to take Isabel. And I'll read one short chapter of this. This is from 382, tongue-in-cheek, rather wittily, in a chapter titled Over the Hills and Far Away. And I think it's at this point that we begin to see that Over the Hills and Far Away, I mean, come on. It's at this point we begin to see that Darkenville's engagement with the love that he has for Isabel and love generally has absolutely fallen into the bounds of fantasy, dangerous fantasy. Cry ahoy, open scuttles, our rendezvous are appointed. We'll journey to Smyrna, Syme, and the land of Pount, the sepulchres of Xenu and the foggy forests of Ermenonville. We'll go hand in hand to Quadling country, the oracle of Trophonius, the river of January, the shapeless magma of Num, and then to the dark mere of Loch Mariaquare, which vouches antiquities no body can know, and then to the state of Swat, Walvis Bay, the land of Dictionopolis, the black pagodas of Canarak. Come, we'll disappear in the hills of the Rubber Pig, the hidden islands of Tarquinium, Fairytown, and the pit called Because. We'll look at the crocodiles of Arabastre, the white elves of Alfheim, the detestable orc of Abunda, the guebas of the Kerman Desert, and the glums of Nosnambusgrt, and use their wings for both flying and for cloths. We'll go to the great Blasket Nantasket and the valley of Casket, run through the polyglot gardens, stroll about Sumitra under the Manicheal trees, and listen to the clashing of holy kettles at Jupiter's brazen oracle at Dodona. This chapter goes on for 5 pages of that. Just this absolute outpouring of a fantasy of engagement with love that, is beginning to move towards this midpoint, beginning to move towards hate, because as we've understood the love-hate mirror that cannot be otherwise. If we look at this fantasy, this fantastical relationship with the love that he wishes, he's drawing his love into a fucking fantasy land, multiple fantasy. It's a fantasy travelogue. He's trying to literally take Isabel Rawthorne. His fantasy is to take her through a travelogue of fictitious, fantastical places, many of which he's made up, that are areas of language. Dictionopolis, the land of Because. This is a madness. This is a Sternian type madness, and this is where sort of the not the kill switch, but the lever unto which the lever unto which will be utilized to transform love into hate in that same mirror is later introduced about 50 pages after this. It is one of the most, and Stephen Moore very much agrees with this in his book, Dr. Abel Crucifer, one of the most unique, terrifying, and strange creations of literature. So this is literally in a chapter called Dr. Crucifer, from 438. And Dr. Crucifer is an ex-Harvard professor who appears to be a Satanist, a satanic sophist, and a misogynist of a degree that you actually can't really fathom, but I'll get to. 438. Dr. Crucifer could have come from another planet. His was a face of Gru, a little balloon of dead white cheeks, jowls with eyes ringed in black, which seemed to have fixed the features they no longer animated. 2 windows, shades drawn. It was a head that Darkenville perhaps had seen only once before, the bust of Niccolo Strozzi in the Dahlem Museum. There was no beard or bodily hair, only a parchment-like pasty skin which wasn't matte white, neither the Chinese white of oil pigment, nor of that hue which leprosy had bleached out, but a sleek, shiny fat with the tint of gambroon. He was tall and cold and white, showing the same peculiar misconfiguration of body that was George Washington's, a pinball-sized head in striking contrast to the tall, elongated trunk of the Abessus, which suggested a kind of blown-out gigantism and ran into swollen breasts, fat pads, and affluent buttocks that seemed to be pinguifying on their own stakes. The thyroid cartilage was inconspicuous. He had tits. He had a buffalo hump in his shoulders. His hands were pudgy, with dimpled knuckles, and his fingers were long and groomed like a woman's. The nails left sharp and cut almost to a triangle. The hair on his head was black, shiny, and hard, bellying an advanced age that could be seen only in his teeth. The effect was that of seeing a great lubberly boy who resembled, forgive the unpicturable image, a giant dwarf. The pendulous belly, a low abdomen big as a budget, a draft sack with short, ineffectual arms that implied poor muscular development, demineralized bones, and extreme fatigability. A malodorous perspiration could be detected as he came closer. Now, I mean, there's a ton of references there to the confrontation with Satan, but the strangeness of this character is his engagement with again much like Isabel Rawsthorne, you could argue that Dr. Crucifer's engagement with the world is one of what we can actually call an excess, a pure excess of bitterness. So in the sense that Theroux and Darconville is very much devout Catholic, the love here is we could say a capital T traditional love between a man and a woman in this arguably fawning and maddening sense. In this way, with the book, there is a huge emphasis on the position of the differences between men and women, and the position of woman in a woman in that form of love. And because of this, there is an equation or an equating with women and love within the novel, and this is far more. The novel will articulate far more broadly and intricately than I can there, but it is there by the time we get to the Dr. Crucifer chapter. But this entails from Dr. Crucifer, who is this figure of pure hate, an engagement with love that is one that seeks to deride women to a degree that you actually can't imagine. Crucifer at certain points seeks to persuade Darconville to quite literally castrate himself, so that the desire towards women, which is really a desire towards a love, is just eradicated and he no longer has to worry about it. One of the most peculiar chapters in the entire book is Dr. Crucifer's library, which is literally titled The Misogynist's Library. This is 9 pages of just listing misogynistic books throughout history. This, much like Bolaño's listing of sexual crimes in 2666, in its excess of 9 pages, solidifies a sort of complete and utter excessive bitterness of Dr. Crucifer that you really just can't imagine. And so this is the point where eventually we go past the midpoint, and Dr. Crucifer also as this agent of, arguably an agent of Satan. So we have, we have love. So the whole book is tailored around or built atop the foundation of a sincere sacredness. So you can say we have love and God's light on one hand, and then as we move through to the second half, we have hate and Satanism. But it's not like a fire and brimstone Satanism. It's a bitter, we could say, secular Satanism, a cunning Satanism that removes the vital aspects that you find in love. Like the things that Theroux would very much take seriously, like birdsong and flowers. These are removed to a pragmatism, to a sense of control. This isn't a Satanism of like possession. This is a Satanism that just seeks to almost get down to a rational reason and rationality of a secular world that is brought forth from Crucifer in such a potency that, what's his answer? Cut your dick off, cut your dick and balls off, so that you just literally won't have to engage with all that nonsense. And so, Crucifer, in this sort of moment of temptation in Biography of a Eunuch, says, I hear you call a maker what I take to be a personified inconceivability, cried Crucifer, his voice like the sound of wind through a patch of dead cat o' nine heads. God, Zeus, Idio, Bog, Dio, Jubmal, Tixo, Bot, Bung, Zung, Gubib, Zen, Ji, or the Great Kazoo, call him whatever you will. Everything suggestive of metaphysical unity disgusts me. Mine is a world essentially manifold. In every man there is a vacuum in the shape of God, but where is he? What is he? That which is not sense exactly. Nonsensical, literally nonsense. I just adore the clemency he exacts, that wears so flatly commercial an aspect, don't you? The fruit of actual purchase, the literal and cogent quid pro quo, Julian hand paid. I tell you, all Christian victuals stink of fish, and his glory depends upon the antagonism of his creature's shame, degrading all of us to whom he owns absolutely, we who recreate him, of whom we are creatures with every one of us. No Guzvenzamai Darconville, bound to him by every last goddamn tenure on earth but spontaneous affection. I tell you, the best proof for the tragedy of existence is the proof that is derived from the contemplation of what is said to be its glories, you will see. The odd lines by Crucifer's cheeks drew out like isobars. God being all things is contrary unto nothing, out of which were made all things, and so nothing became something, an omniety and form nullity and into an existence. Now I call that a nice trick, don't you? And then, was he even acquainted with himself? All he could utter was, I am who am. A tautology, excuse me, I take to be the essence of deceit. Your soul, whispered Darconville. Darconville's still got it. He's still holding on to something. Of course, Crucifer continues on with, he really draws Darconville in a feat of hatred and bitterness and soullessness that is astounding. And so this is the point where a lot of the second half, or maybe the latter 30% of the novel, is Crucifer. What we're witnessing is Crucifer as an embodiment of hatred, bringing Darconville in to his world of bitterness and hatred. Bit of a tautology. But what we're also seeing is how love begins to be bastardized. And I think I wouldn't want to completely put a mirroring there, but in a sense that Tolkien makes very explicit, actually, what we see, as per Darconville's little comment there, your soul, as per sort of Tolkien's engagement with Christian morality, is that there is no such thing as evil on its own. It's only ever a bastardization of the good and of the true. And so the love is first. The love has to be first, and it springs forth in a spontaneous joy that Darconville can't really contain because of his engagement with the world. He also can't really see sense. But then what is the evil? It has to come as the second half. It has to be. Evil is always the potent second half that is only using the fuel of the first half for its engagement. And so Darconville sees all this. He sort of knows all this, I think. And so it's only in the false theatrics of Crucifer that this is able to be bastardized at all. And as we move forward there's a quick section in Oratio contra Feminas. That's the chapter. The time has come, Darconville, to the confusion, I hope, of the propagators of this slanderous imputation that women are necessary. When I find I must address you in a more ceremonious form of speech and submit to you your judgment, this deliberate exhortation, for what avails the best intentions with the worst administration, that you may weigh the nearly inexpressible baseness into which, for this self-same persuasion, exege facias, you shall otherwise surely sink, begins quite literally an oration of persuasion towards Darconville from Dr. Crucifer. But what begins as this oration, then you notice that it descends into what's interesting is that the evil of this world now begins to tap up against the asinine, the banal, in a way that sounds almost like sort of a late 80s British comedian. So this is suddenly from Dr. Crucifer, who at one point was, erudite and was holding it together. What evil? Well, in the same way that the potency of love has its own eternity, that we say is like a blossoming flower, an eternity outwards. The evil, the potency of evil, the eternity of evil isn't really an eternity at all. And in the sense that it can only go inward toward itself in that way of hate and evil, it becomes insane. But before that, I think it has to pass through a banality. For instance, can you imagine what domestic life with a woman must be and still gamble away your life for a mere toss at such a perishable being? It is the single sex for whom marriage for love is so rare that a vow of obedience, arguable antonym of love, is still exacted in the nuptial contract, and what they bring to the hearth must be limited. I'm afraid to what are their only natural gifts, 3 in number, deceitfulness, spinning, and the capacity to weep at will. Now, a family's happiness, it's been said, is always in proportion to the cultivation of its female members, but as they're congenitally unable to be satisfied, save only by movable property or the proximity of some male neighbour mustachioed like a Circassian to compare you to, the hygienic penalty that must be paid for woman's denial of her real nature becomes inescapable, is the hysterical self-dissatisfaction inherent in striving to be what, to get, they who weren't once convinced you they were. The saint then becomes a scold. The portcullis drops. The more a woman's made an occupation of torturing her husband, you see, the less right she thinks she has to lose him. Her hold over him increasing to the measure of her coldness. And he goes on and on. He begins to say, they nag, they gripe, they whatever. And it begins to descend into, hang on, like Darkenville is still sort of caught in the snares of this. But what once was a foray into a genuine engagement of a discussion of love and hate and truth and beauty, as in this entropy towards hate, it's passing through this realm of banality that is possibly some sort of evil, lukewarm opposite, and heading somewhere that really just becomes basically insane, like literally insane. And so what begins with the chapter on hate mirroring the earlier chapter on love. Hate, said Dr. Crucifer, is love's other face. They are complements, not opposites. The emotion owes all its meaning, as I've told you, to the demand for love, each expressing an impulse which exists only by an antagonism to the fear that oppresses it. For one can never be a hater without having had this ideal that one, always loving, will always be loved in return. So the bitterness builds and builds and builds. Crucifer's appreciation of love is more Manichaean in the sense that they actually have the same thing, that they have a balance, that there's a possibility of hate in the sense that it's the satanic devil or the satanic bitterness of Crucifer. It's a bit more Manichaean because there's a like a possibility that one could win over the other. Whereas when we begin from the first chapter, I think in that Tolkien sense, we understand that can't be. But this builds and builds and builds towards a chapter called Why Don't You? So which comes after Revenge, which is a huge topic for Thoreau. But Why Don't You begins with the words, stab her with a bung starter, right? And this is an entire chapter from Crucifer's point of view that is about 8 pages long. And I'll give you one example of things. This is hate itself finally reached its complete sort of 0 point of folding into itself. So, it's called Why Don't You? Acupunctuate her, swinge her, thunderstone her, feed her a full bag of creep ration, dearchuate her with a pair of calipers, dose her simultaneously with huge amounts of sinequan and membroin, perforane and pamorphin, melarin and Esidrex, infibulate her with a curved set-on needle, pack her bathtub deep in dough and harden her into a human beef Wellington, tug a sail needle through her nose points, anchor her down by the bizzle hairs and roger her arseways, feed her poison garbongs, cryogenize her into a glacial dirt band, flame up a hornbeam into her eye, cripple her and give her a 16th century larder pan to slide herself about like a cul-de-jac, pinch the back of her neck white with a tension forceps, fuse her legs together into a tail, lock her into the bull of Phalaris, gamma hutch her in with the tip of a Pompeia ladder, take out her 28 miles of intestines and with them hang her parents from the storefront in Foes Mount. This goes on for 8 pages of absolute just the most like sort of stepping back from the novel and saying what hate's face is revealed in a moment of complete insanity that again, I do see parallels with sort of Captain Ahab's final, there's nothing else to be done here other than just, for hate's sake, I spit my last breath at you. Crucifer's sort of last breaths of persuasion, in quotation marks, to Darkenville are nothing more than sort of this, the eruption of a collective unconscious id just firing onto the page in pure insanity that takes a serious boldness to write and just continue. And Thoreau does this with dramatic effect. But then we get near the end nearing the end of the novel, what happens as per the, this is built for like 680 pages, and finally he's convinced by Crucifer to take a gun and wait where Isabel is currently staying and kill her. And while he's there, and it's very strange, and it's very quick ending to this great build, and the redemption of love via memory, is that all that happens is that Darkenville sees on a tree back when he was in love with her, back in that feeling, he carved the word remember into the tree, and that just stops him in his tracks. And he goes away to Venice, where he was briefly at the beginning of the novel, and just after this moment where he's seen the word remember, and love finally overtakes the ridiculousness because evil and hate doesn't have anything. In the chapter Choir Me Some Paper, Quire me some paper, cried Darkville. Shear me a sheep for vellum. Nail me out a desk with the timber of redwoods. A quill flop effect shoots from the sky to occupy my hand. Sound me the Dorian mode. I am alive, O sunset, come back from the dead, and from thy crucible dost thou call me forth even as I am. All is in movement. There are angels come to bandage the wounded angels of battle and bend to lift me from the darkness to the light. Busion, silence is full of execution, and intuition and desire lie undestroyed. I will squeeze secrets from the tips of my fingers. I will bring noses to window panes. I am still Darkenville, master of my fate, captain of my soul. Which could very well be a little reference to maybe Deep Down. But what is this? Darkenville finds the sacred love that he was originally given. Moved away from the Trappists out of a love of literature, the love that was the intermingling of his feelings for Rawsthorn and for literature are entwined. And from that, he has realized his true love for literature. And what's his sort of dedication? His dedication is, well, that's the last excerpt I'm reading. So what is his endpoint is Darkenville's cat, as far as I'm concerned. He goes off to Venice to read Darkenville's, to write this book. I haven't mentioned the cat because that's a far more complex thread. And he has a cat called Spellvexit, which is used as a literary means of signals with regards to Darkenville's relationship to hate and love, Satan and God throughout the novel in a way that I can't mention everything. But Spellvexit is a fantastic name for a cat. So that is the whole novel. I'm almost up to an hour and 40 here. Well, that's not the whole novel. I mean, there's 700 pages of that, and there really isn't. There just isn't a word. There isn't a word put wrong. There isn't a paragraph put wrong. And to be hyperbolic, I mean, again, it is one of the best books I've ever read. I mean, it is the definition of accomplished. It is just an outstanding feat. I mean, it's seriously the word feat of thinking about what it is. There's a few books in the world that one thinks about and thinks, I'm almost in disbelief that someone sat down and crafted this and put this together. I'm astounded and in disbelief as to how something such as this can be put together. And many people, I want to actually jump back a little bit right to the beginning and just focus on the fact that I said it's a good book, because one of the sort of false misappreciations of Thoreau is that he is known for using this Victorian attic treasure chest of language, of obscure words, of obscure references, of obscure allusions to these forgotten plays, and it feels very, to use a crass word, many people say it feels a bit wanky, but it's not. It isn't that. It's not as if you sort of struggling through like a Pynchon novel, or something of this kind, where it's just trying to be more explicit in its engagement with those technical forms of reference and using the complicated word. I mean, to sound a little like a lazy reader, you can read this, and if you don't know the definition of the word, it's written in such a sense that you have the natural linguistic understanding of it, and you can go look it up. But you don't have to be flicking around like Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest all the time. It is a great book. So the sort of the damning of Thoreau as sort of impenetrable or difficult in that way is just completely false, because it's a book you could just pick up and read for enjoyment. If you wanted to sit down and study it, absolutely, there is a depth there that's unfathomable. But at root, and this is like a very paradoxical thing to say regarding the reality of it, at root, I mean, it's just a seriously great book. And I think that's what Thoreau's at base is attempted to do. So his love of literature is what? It's a love of something that comes around of sitting down and not wanting to sit down with like Pynchon, where you feel like I have to look up every single reference, and it's like I don't want to sit down, and if I wanted to do a puzzle, I'd get one out of a box. It's not that. Let's sit down and read a great book that engages with true things like love, hate, beauty, truth, goodness, and God and the devil. This isn't postmodernism. This is not postmodern. I want to emphasize that at the end. This is if any book that I've read deserves to be, if this isn't if this isn't remembered in two, honestly, even 300-500 years as one of the great pieces of literature of the 20th century, that's just an error. That's a serious fault. And much like much great literature, Moby Dick is a great example. The Recognitions by Gaddis, which is another novel I feel will be canonized in that way. It's just been forgotten. It's been completely forgotten. The experience seems to be reminiscent of Gaddis's Recognitions release, where, you know, a few lazy reviews that Theroux is more than happy to be explicit about do not, you know, just this thing lands with a slap and just doesn't go anywhere, with a lot of the books being remaindered. Yeah, so that, you know, it's fawning appreciation and reverential appreciation, but it's astounding. It is an astounding book, absolutely, just a masterpiece. And, you know, it's one of the things that's unfortunate, because, you know, you usually at the end of these reviews I'd say, well, you know, go read it. It's a very autumnal book. I think it'd be great to read through in autumn. It's really fantastic. And if you're also if you're, you know, interested in love, hey, God, devil, absolutely. If you're interested in just great literature, absolutely. But the reason I say it's unfortunate is because it does need to be read as a book that you hold. It's one of very much like if reading Moby Dick, you want to hold it. You want to have this experience of this seriousness and the book as an object as well, and as a thing that's like on your shelf in the history of literature. And that's unfortunate because, you know, anyone who's listened to this may now think, like, dear me, James, you've really trying to sell me on how good this book is. I'm going to go grab a copy. There isn't a copy out there now that's under $200, unfortunately. If you know, it's sort of like almost like a call to people to rescue these if you see them anywhere. I think there's about 15,000 of them, but I can't imagine how many considering many thousands got remaindered. Yeah, I can't imagine how many are, but there is also the paperback edition. This is the Doubleday edition, the second first edition Doubleday edition. That's what I have. But yeah, I mean, hopefully it'll be republished. But for anyone who gets with Alexander Theroux by Stephen Moll, may begin to understand why that might not happen, unfortunately. But that is also an absolutely fantastic book. So I'll put links for that book in the description below, which is you're still able to acquire. But as for Darkenville's Cat, I mean, hopefully some of you will get it. Hopefully it'll be republished at some point in time. But it's a touchstone of modern literature, it really is. And I can't see any book usurping this for a while. Of, you know, if someone says, "What's the last great book you read?" I really just, unless I'd never read Moby Dick, or I'd never read Blood Meridian would be an example. You know, something of that greatness, unless I'd never read them and then read them later on. But I just can't see anything kicking this off that fluxing top spot for a while. So what's the last great book you read? I mean, it's going to be a long time, I think, unfortunately. But yeah, anyway, we're getting on for an hour and 45 on a single book, but that is my review. And for those that stayed till the end, thank you very much. That is my review and thoughts of Alexander Theroux's Darkenville's Cat, a novel. So thank you for listening.